Hello again, everyone. This is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, November 9th, 2022, the day after Election Day, the day that Robert Harding really is going on fumes because he probably got a few hours of sleep. Justin Ritzel's well rested because he had last night off. Of course, he played hockey, right? So you might be a little sore from all that action, right?
I'm not well rested. We had 7 guys, which means only 2 guys on the bench. For a 32-year-old man, that is worst case scenario. So
32.
Yeah, 32.
I thought you were 30. 32?
Well, that's a compliment. Well, there you go.
There we go.
As for me operating on fumes, I take offense to that. I'll take me on 30 minutes of sleep over you, Chris, and you need to sleep like a baby for 9 to 10 hours. So
where's the baby? Right. Speaking of babies, where is your daughter right now? Is she in good hands or?
She's downstairs with mom.
Yeah. With mom. Okay, there we go. I feel better now. Hate to see anything happen to the birthday girl there. All righty, so let's get started here. Quick recap of last week. We had 2 pushes. I think that's a first in almost 10 years of doing this. And Robert went 0-2, and Justin and I each went 1-1. So now Robert and I are tied at 18-15, and Justin is nipping at our heels at 16-16. So it's lots of fun. All righty, so here's our first few games. Our first game happens in jolly old London, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. No, I'm sorry. Is it? No, I'm sorry. It's not jolly old London. It's Germany. And I'm not doing a German accent. No way. You get in trouble doing that stuff. No, I'm not doing a German accent. So Seattle is a 3-point favorite versus Tampa Bay in beautiful Munich, Germany. For some reason, I thought that game was in London. I knew it was in Europe, though. All right, so Seattle coming off another impressive win. I think they have to be called the biggest surprise team of the season by far. The Buccaneers, Tom Brady bailed them out at the end, saved their season against the Rams. The Bucs are 3-point favorites. I wonder, look, you know how I am, Robert, with these cliches and everything, that there's a lot of travel going on here. If you're coming from the West Coast, you're flying a long, long, long way to play in Germany. And I think they're coming in on Friday from what I read. And I believe were the Seahawks at home last week, or were they on the road they played Arizona, but I can't remember if they were home or on the road.
I believe they played on the road.
They played on the road. So we're talking back-to-back road games, plus having to go literally halfway around the world. Buccaneers played at home last week. We know that. Coming off a very important win. But, I think the Buccaneers win had more to do with the Rams not being a good team right now, more than it did that the Buccaneers were that good. So that being said, I'm going with a hot hand. I'm taking the Seahawks to cover the -3 against the Buccaneers. I think that this could be a fun one. I think the Seattle defense is going to be important. And Geno Smith, who's everybody's comeback player of the year award winner, possibly, or even MVP conversation, believe it or not. I think he has a good game too. So I like the Seahawks to cover the -3. Go ahead, Robert.
I watched that Bucks Rams game last week, and I didn't know what to make of the Bucks. Certainly that last drive led by Brady was impressive. He closed that out like a divorce, I tell you. But the Bucks don't. They've battled some injuries this year, and then even when they've been healthy, it's tough to tell like what is this team's identity. They really haven't looked like the team that many people thought they would be, coming into the season. The Seahawks, though, they continue to impress. Geno Smith is slinging the rock around. Defense has played okay. They certainly have, pretty good offense there. That Kenneth Walker, running back, he played at Michigan State last season during the college football season, and saw him play. Watched him play on TV a couple times, and he's certainly impressed, and he's showing out in the NFL now. Yeah, I like the Seahawks. I think that they're just a better team. Brady, that drive aside, didn't really do much against the Rams last week, and the Rams are a garbage team. The Seahawks, this is a team that, they're overachieving a bit. Obviously, coming into the season, that not a whole lot of hope for them, but Pete Carroll has them playing good football right now. So, they'll go over to Germany, beat the Bucks, maybe sing a little Hasselhoff, and then make the trip home.
Justin, who do you like?
Well, I'm not taking much out of Tampa Bay's win last week. That was just they were playing a bad Rams team, so I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that all their woes are cured. Yet for all their foibles here, like Tampa Bay has still got a great shot to win that division and make the playoffs. And I think the Seahawks are a great story. I don't think they're a pushover team. They're obviously not going to be. They're not one of the worst teams in football, as I think they were universally expected to be. But I still think Tampa Bay has a lot of talent on their team, even if they have not performed like it. And I do think they see a path here where they can still kind of salvage their season. And as much as Tom Brady did not play well for most of the game last weekend, and as much as he hasn't played well this season, man, even in this hellscape of a season, I just can't bring myself to bet against him with Geno Smith. As good as Geno's played, I will go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
All righty. Our next game is Justin's Green Bay Packers. They are 5-point underdogs at home to the Dallas Cowboys. Justin, the floor is yours.
Well, speaking of hellscape of a season, hey, here's prime example number one, the Green Bay Packers, the team that was, NFC favorites to make the Super Bowl before the season. That ain't happening. Just an absolutely abysmal loss. Sunday at Detroit. It wasn't even, they didn't even necessarily play bad. It's just they made dumb, and I'm gonna single out one person, Mr. Aaron Rodgers, the highest paid player in the NFL, made two moronic throws inside the 5-yard line, and it cost his team the game. I've made a lot of excuses for Rodgers, if you want to call it that. I think legitimately the circumstance around him is poor, and they did not do a good enough job with giving him offensive talent. The guy's 38 years old, soon to be 39. Expecting him to work with a bunch of young guys when he's just, it's the old saying, trying to teach an old dog new tricks. He is who he is, for better or worse, and I think expecting him to try and bring along a bunch of young guys and deal with, veterans that can't stay healthy. I love Randall Cobb, can't stay healthy. Sammy Watkins, it was a promising prospect at one point. Well, he's almost 30 years old, can't stay healthy. Alan Lazard, I think, is a useful receiver, can't stay healthy. So, Green Bay made this bed. They got to lay in it. They're really banged up. Rashawn Gary's out for the season, tore his ACL. I still don't know what the hell's going on with their offensive line. They have not consistently had the same line all season long. That's been a problem. Everything, it's the old Murphy's Law. Anything that can happen, anything that can go wrong, will go wrong. That's been the Green Bay Packers in a nutshell this year. And yet, I have a hard time thinking that at the very least, they're not going to come out here and perform and play well against Dallas, against Mike McCarthy. Listen, if Rodgers doesn't show up this week, get rid of him, because it'll never happen if he can't get it done against Mike McCarthy's team. Packers have lost some close games. 5 points at home is a relatively big spread. I'm not saying they're going to win this game, but I do think it'll come down to the last possession, maybe be a field goal difference. So with that said, against all odds, no pun intended, I'll take the Green Bay Packers.
Robert, who you got?
Well, your old dog reference reminded me of a certain internet sports show that few people watch, but we all love. this week, this game, to me, the Cowboys have been playing good football. 6-2 this season. The Packers have done the opposite, and I think, I've read some stories about like just the LaFleur offense, and this doesn't look like the Packers teams of the last couple of years that, yes, they had Devontae Adams, but, Rodgers was, better than ever. The team was, clicking on all cylinders. And now they look lost out there. I didn't watch, all of the Packers Lions game, but I caught some highlights, and boy, that this looks like a totally different team than they were a year ago. So it's hard to believe that it just comes down to Devontae not being there. I think, there's certainly something deeper, whether it's, Rodgers' commitment to the game, whatever it may be. I know that they've been dealing with some injuries too, but, the Cowboys, they've been playing well. And I think, Mike McCarthy is going to want to come in to Green Bay and make a statement that, hey, I miss you guys, love my time in Green Bay, but look at me now. And so I'm taking the Cowboys in this one. I think that they can win this by a touchdown. And if Rodgers keeps making mistakes, it could get ugly. So, I'm going to ride with the Cowboys in this one. I think that they just, top to bottom, they have a much better team.
Yeah. If this was +7, if Green Bay was +7, I'd be tempted to take the Packers to cover, but it's +5. I'm going with the Cowboys too, Robert, basically for what you said. They're the better team. And I think the Cowboys know that they've got to keep up with Philadelphia, that they do have an outside shot at the division. Very unlikely, but still they have a shot. They've got to win against the Eagles later on this year to have a chance. But and like you said, I think Mike McCarthy wants to prove something when he comes in. For the Packers, I think they're going to play better. I think last week was rock bottom for this team. When you lose to Detroit, I don't know how much lower you can go, but I just think that this is unfortunately the wrong team for the Packers to be playing, and they're trying to get better. And, I think they'll hang in there for a little bit, but I think that the Cowboys are going to win and cover their -5 there when it's all said and done. Our next game is my Miami Dolphins, 3-game winning streak. Tied for second, but with a tiebreaker, they're third in the AFC East. They are 3.5-point favorites at home versus the Cleveland Browns. Tua, I gotta give him props. He is really played incredibly well this season. I didn't know he could play this well, to be honest with you, but that's the Mike McDaniel system and everything. And it's been amazing. It really has been. And Tyreek Hill putting up possibly MVP-like numbers. I mean, he's on a verge of 2,000 receiving yards. Jalen Waddle, and that offense has been electric, no doubt about it. The defense is my concern, though. The defense, they let Justin Fields go for 168 rushing yards last week, which was a quarterback record for a regular season game. The Dolphins defense has not been up to snuff. And if you look at the points allowed this year, Dolphins are, I believe, 3rd worst or 4th worst in the AFC in points allowed. Now, some of that is, they gave up a punt, they gave up a kickoff return touchdown. I believe there was a pick 6 there someplace maybe. But irregardless, the Dolphins defense is not playing the way that people thought they were going to. And there's been some injuries in the secondary, and that's part of it too. And of course, they had to get the pass rush. So that's why they traded for Chubb last week. So anyways, the Browns, Jacoby Brissett has done a credible job filling in for Deshaun Watson. Of course, Jacoby Brissett was the Dolphins quarterback a little bit last year when Tua was hurt. I don't think there's any revenge game here with this one. But the Dolphins, they got something going here. They're rolling. And I mean, look, Cleveland has a great pass rush. That's going to be the key. But I think Mike McDaniel finds a way to neutralize that. And I like the Dolphins to cover the 3.5 and win by at least 6 points. So I'm picking my Dolphins to cover the 3.5 against the Browns. Go ahead, Robert.
Looking at the Browns' schedule, I mean, they've played some close games this year. They've won some, lost some as well. I think they're better than their record suggests. I mean, I don't think they're that much better, but they certainly have talent on both sides of the football. Nick Chubb, I think, could be a problem for the Dolphins defense. I mean, if Justin Fields can carve you up, Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the league, can go for, I don't know, maybe 200, 225, somewhere in
There's
there.
between a quarterback and a running back, though, Robert. Big difference. Big difference. Plus,
Hey, I don't care if it's a quarterback, running back, a kicker. I saw that team try to tackle them, and they whiffed every time. So if you're going to do that to Justin Fields, boy, Nick Chubb is going to have a field day.
I just want to see Chubb tackle Chubb.
Hopefully, you don't get a Chubb over that.
Yeah.
My take on this game, look, the Dolphins offense, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, two players on my soon to be fantasy football championship team.
You're welcome.
I think that those two players are really the key. Tua, I think he thrives in this environment. I get it. He's a big, he's waving his stuff around, talking about how many deep balls he throws, but his bread and butter, the short and intermediate passing game, these receivers are perfect for that. They've got a lot of speed. They can play over the middle. They can go deep. I mean, it's the perfect fit for the quarterback, and they've really thrived. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. A little nervous after last week when they played footsie with the Bears, and it was a 3-point game. This spread, a little nervous, but I think they'll get the job done.
Well, if Miami if their kicker had made a 29-yard field goal, they would have covered the 6. They would have covered the 3. I know Jason Sanders, who's being paid a lot of money. He could find himself unemployed if he doesn't start improving. All righty, Justin, who do you like?
Well, I don't want to crush Chris's Dolphins and his hopes. They've been an exciting team, and I think if you're a fan of them, you should be encouraged and happy that I think I said this in the last couple of weeks. You finally have an exciting team to watch. So congratulations. It's been 25 years since Dan Marino retired. So
23 years since Dan retired.
I mean, you had that brief rest. You had that brief respite with the 1 year that the Wildcat worked, and that's it. That's the only time you've had exciting offense. So congrats. Welcome back to modern football. We're all happy for you guys. I think the Dolphins are a solid team, and obviously they can score. But even though they're 6-3 on the season, they're 4-5 against the spread. And I know part of that is they've missed Tua for a few games, but as good as their offense has been, their defense tends to allow other teams to score points and stay in games. That was the case last week. You look at their 6 wins in the season. They have not won a game by multiple scores since week 1 against New England. Every other game they've won has been by a difference of 6 points or less. There's been a couple 3-point wins in there. So the Dolphins are not a team that, even though their offense is certainly capable of putting up points, they haven't shown they are capable of really putting teams away. Their defense just doesn't get stops. So against the Browns team that runs the ball effectively, especially after what Miami's run defense did last week, it's hard to be confident that it's going to be any different this week. I think Miami's going to win, but that extra half point, that's a no-no for me. So I'm going to go with the Browns here, who I think can run the ball and play enough defense to keep this game close.
I'd be honest with you, I have a hard time disagreeing with you, Justin. That's a very good point. And but I think Miami's home field is going to be a little helpful too with the heat and everything. And
it's November. Come on.
It's still hot down there. Trust me. It's still
the NFL players, 75% of them are from the South, probably more. So
trust me. Yeah, I get it. All right. Our last game, and this is an interesting one. The LA Chargers playing at the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners, a big 7-point favorite. Now, of course, the Chargers have been banged up. They've had some injuries. The 49ers have had some injuries too, but it seems like San Francisco, since the trade for McCaffrey there, they've really have turned it on and are playing some pretty good football. The Chargers, I mean, everybody thought this team was going to be right up there with Kansas City, and they're kind of in the middle. So interesting game. But I like the Niners to cover the -7. It's a big home spread. I know I'm going to regret it. I know this is going to kill any parlay chances I have, but I'm going to take the Niners to cover the -7 and beat the Chargers. So, Justin, who do you like in this game?
Well, this is kind of a weird game because both teams have quite a bit of injuries. I don't think Niners are coming off a bye. I'm shocked that you didn't bring that up, Chris. But they had a lot of injuries going into their last game before the bye. They still crushed those bum Rams. But this is a tough one for me because these are two teams that I tend to praise before the season, and neither of them have really looked kind of like I expected. They're both 4-4. I think I know the Niners are 4-4. I can't remember if the Chargers are or not, but maybe they're 5-4. I don't know. But okay, so this is a big spread. I mean, 7 points for two teams that are, you really don't know what you're going to get out of them either week. We can talk about how the Niners have looked better since they've acquired McCaffrey. I mean, I don't know. We're talking 2 games. In the first game he played there, they got absolutely trounced by Kansas City. So I don't know. I in games like this, especially when it's this big of a spread, I really just want to lean on the better quarterback, and that is Justin Herbert, not Jimmy Garoppolo. So, I think the Niners are going to win, but 7 points is too rich for my blood. So I'll take the Chargers getting the 7.
Robert, who do you like?
Yeah, this is a tough one because the Garoppolo is kind of the wild card here. If he plays well, if they can get McCaffrey going, you could easily see this turning into a blowout, the way that the Chargers have played at some points this year. But if Garoppolo struggles, then how much of an offense will they have? The defense is solid, but again, as Justin mentioned, they've been dealing with some injuries this season. The Chargers are just just a weird team. They had some trouble with the Falcons last week. They did win that game. And they somehow have a winning record, despite some really weird games. I go back to that blowout loss to the Jaguars and look at where those two teams are now. The Jaguars seem to be on track to make a real statement this year, and then collapsed really after that. So but I agree with Justin here. The spread I think is too big. With 7, I mean this could easily turn into another push. I love these spreads that these odds makers come up. Just throw a half point in there, help us out a little bit, maybe 6.5, 7.5, then we could split the difference. But yeah, this is a tough one for me. So I'm going to take the Chargers to cover here. I actually think that this could be a close game. I get that, with McCaffrey, people think like, oh, the Niners, they can go to new heights. But remember, this guy's played with the Panthers for a few years, and what did he ever do for their team? So let's pump the brakes on that. I think this will be a close game.
All righty. So now we'll do our NFL Week 9 takeaways. And Robert, you go first. What are your takeaways from Week 9?
Well, for me, obviously the Bills game comes to mind, and we substituted that game out because of Josh Allen's injury. But I think looking at the Bills, there's a lot of question marks, really. I mean, obviously the injuries have taken a toll, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They were without 2 of their best defensive players on Sunday. But the play of Josh Allen, and now he's dealing with an injury. I'll be curious to see how they handle this, because right now you don't need to win. If you're thinking like we have to be aggressive here, we got to get the number 1 seed. I think that's where, you can play with fire a bit, maybe risk, an even worse injury, and then your season goes down the can. At this point, I think honestly, they're thinking, we just have to get in to the playoffs here, and we have to make sure that Josh Allen's healthy to be there, come January and hopefully February. So, but I think that this will be a time to really kind of reset. I remembered back last year, this same weekend, last weekend, 1 year ago, was that stinker of a Jaguars game that comes up on this video from time to time about, these tendencies of, Josh Allen and the Bills to kind of have these stinkers. It's not that they're an inconsistent team, but they have these clunkers, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, is this team a true contender or not? But the Jets game really reminded me of that, even though the Jets, they certainly played good defensive football. I still think Zach Wilson's a bum. They ran the ball pretty well in that last drive, and, credit to them. They it was the difference. They won the game, with that field goal. But, the Bills find new ways to really shoot themselves in the foot. We saw this start in the second half against the Packers. I mean, the Packers didn't really do much in that second half, other than run the ball. And, the Bills didn't do much on offense. And, we saw what happened, that turned into a 10-point game, and it felt closer than maybe it actually was. But, I think that this will be hopefully a wake-up call for the Bills, that, if they do have to play without their quarterback for a week or two, which, at least this week, it looks like a possibility they might be without him, that it's a wake-up call that, hey, look, we're not the Buffalo Josh Allens, we're the Buffalo Bills. And, guys need to show up. That offensive line, was like a screen door in a submarine last week. They need to shore up stuff. I think Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator, needs to find new ways to get players involved in the offense, guys not named Stephon Diggs. And Gabriel Davis needs to remember how to catch the damn ball. So, you put all these things together, and I think it's, this will be a good experience, I think, for the Bills in the end, to be like, what? Josh Allen isn't the whole team. Very important part of the team, but we need everybody showing up here. And if you guys just think that Josh is going to carry us to the promised land, well, guess what? That's not how the NFL works. So hopefully, if it does come to Josh Allen not playing this week, it's an opportunity for some of these guys to realize that they need to take a greater role, greater responsibility with this team to take them where they want to go.
Justin, your takeaways from last week.
Well, I think what's going on with the Bills is, and Josh Allen in particular, is one of the biggest stories in the NFL right now. I mean, it sounds like he escaped a long-term injury. You see UCL, and if you're a baseball fan, which we all are, that those are 3 letters put together that are a little scary. I mean, it's a good thing that sounds like Josh Allen. This is not, Sean McDermott said it's a day-to-day thing. Hopefully that's the case. And, even if he misses this week, or if he has to miss a few weeks here, the Bills are playing NFC teams 2 out of the next 3 weeks, the Vikings this week, and then in a couple of weeks they have the Lions, which I think they should be able to win whether or not he's playing. But I do think it'll be telling here, because the Bills, on offense at least, are a team that they are built around Josh Allen. I know you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks, that they're built specifically with how their quarterback wants to play, but that is true, especially with the Bills. They are not a running football team in terms of, we can go win games by handing the ball off to Singletary and Zach Moss, 30 times a game. Josh Allen's their leading rusher this year, and they are built to throw the ball. And when their offensive line loses a snap, that he can overcome that. He's the ultimate deodorant to even when the defense wins a play, he can overcome that. That's how good he is. And I'm not concerned about the Bills. I still think that, top to bottom, their roster's as good as anyone. But I think last week was an example that, the margin for error is still thin enough where you cannot afford to have a bad week in the AFC. It was a stacked conference going in. I think some of the teams that we expected to be good have not been, but some teams that we did not expect to be good have been. The Jets are an example of that. I think Miami had, I don't want to say super high expectations, but they had some promise with some of the additions they made, and they've lived up to that. So the AFC East is not a cakewalk like I think a lot of people expected. And I still expect the Bills to win the division. I still think they have a very good chance at having the number 1 seed. They have the tiebreaker over the 3 other teams that are probably going to win their divisions in the AFC. They beat the Chiefs, they beat the Ravens, they beat the Titans. So I think they can afford to slip up here and maybe give Josh Allen that week or two he needs off and still be in position to win the conference, or at least give themselves home field and the only first round bye. But that's unfortunately a tough lesson that I have watched my team do to themselves several times. Is, hey, it's great if you feel you're playing well throughout the regular season, but you have one bad week, and that's the difference between winning a Super Bowl and not. So I hope, for the sake of the Bills, who I think do things the right way and have put together a roster that is certainly Super Bowl caliber, I hope that they don't shoot themselves in the foot too many times, because the Chiefs look pretty good this weekend, and they have that winning pedigree that the Bills have not quite, or I should say that winning DNA that the Bills haven't proven they have yet. So we'll see. I'm still hopeful on Buffalo, but again, it's just a reminder that you can't take weeks off. You can't take opponents for granted, which I think they've done the last couple weeks.
Yeah, Justin, I was going to kind of leapfrog off what you just said. I mean, the AFC East arguably is the best division in football right now. I mean, the AFC East is what people thought the AFC West was going to be this year. That, everybody was talking about, all 4 teams in the AFC West could make the playoffs this year. It's an arms race in the AFC West. Look what's going on with all these teams and everything. And realistically, the only team that's going to make the playoffs realistically from the AFC West is Kansas City. The Raiders are not making it. The Broncos are not making it. And the Chargers, who knows? I mean, but I don't think they're going to make it right now. You look at the AFC East. Yeah, the Bills are in. Pencil them in. The Dolphins, right now, the way they're playing, I think they make the playoffs. I think they could at least they could
really going out on a limb there.
They could finish 12-5. They could realistically finish 12-5, or at the worst, if they play up to their potential, the worst is 10-6. Okay, or 10-7, I should say. Okay. I hate to say it, I'm still not used to the 17 game schedule here when I do the numbers, but and then the Jets, I mean, look, that was a shocker last week. I mean, for the Jets to beat the Bills like that, I mean, and I get it. Josh Allen didn't play his best game and he was hurt and everything else. But, I mean, you got to give the Jets credit. They won the game. They won it. And, we can make the jokes about Wilson and everything. I mean, obviously he's still developing as a quarterback. But the Jets are doing enough on offense, and their defense is carrying that team that they're 6-3. And then the Patriots, who everybody was writing off in late September, they're 5-4. And, conceivably all 4 AFC East teams could make the playoffs. It is not far-fetched. It could happen. And that's just mind-blowing, because for all of us, the last 20 years, all we've known is Patriots. I mean, the Jets might have a good year now and then. The Dolphins may have a decent year now and then. The Bills might have a decent year now and then. But all of a sudden now, the Bills, have a dynasty in waiting, ready to win some Super Bowls here. And then the Jets, who have been rebuilding since 1969, basically, all of a sudden they look like they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. My Dolphins all of a sudden look like it could be the 90s all over again with the Bills and Dolphins going at it for the top two spots in the division. And the Patriots, who, again, incredible that, their defense has played very well, and they're hanging around at 5-4. So, yes, the AFC East is a little watered down from what it used to be. And the fact that the AFC West has become just a bad division. And the AFC South is a horrible division. And the North isn't that good as it used to be, because realistically, it's the Ravens and the Bengals. And when the Browns get Deshaun Watson back, yeah, they'll be better, but that's going to be next year. And the Steelers, because, they don't have a quarterback anymore, at least so far, unless Kenny Pickett shows something, they're toast. So it's going to be interesting to see how how these games go down the stretch, where the playoff seedings are. And, if we do get all 4 AFC East teams in the AFC playoffs, is just astounding, and we'll see how it goes. So, guys, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Well, I agree with you, Chris. I pull up the standings, and you look at the AFC South, and 3 of those 4 teams have losing records. So you really got the Titans there at 5-3. It's their division to lose. And then you got the Ravens at 6-3, leading the AFC North. You got the Bengals, at 5-4, and then the Browns at 3-5 are kind of interesting because they certainly have played better than their record suggests. Yeah. But those losses pile up, and if you lose a couple more before Deshaun Watson gets back, you're that margin for error kind of goes away, especially with how well the AFC East teams are playing. And I think, is it possible that all 4 could get in? Sure, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of these division games to be played.
Yes, that's true.
And I think that's where it gets into like, well, maybe the Patriots don't get in or the Jets don't get in, and that helps out a team like the Chargers or the Bengals. So realistically, you look at the AFC, and you've got maybe 10 teams that are in position there to get those 7 spots in the playoffs. And I think really what happens in the AFC East and in those games will impact how that playoff race shakes out. Because if any of those teams lose, the Bills have already lost multiple AFC East games, but if other teams below them lose 1 or 2 of those games, well, it opens a door for a Cincinnati or the Chargers to get in there. So going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds this year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun down the stretch. Next couple of months are going to be a blast. So, all righty, folks, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.